Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Karen Rose Gredler, and I am one of the lay ministers here at FUS. I'm grateful this morning to be joined by the worship team of John Powell, Drew Collins, Linda Warren, the Reverend Doug Watkins, Steve Gregorius, and Daniel Carnes. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called by love to cultivate relationships, to nurture mind and spirit, and to grow justice in the world. We are doing this together in the time of live-streamed worship as we remember the love, compassion, and resilience that live within and among us. We may be isolated, but we are never alone. In this time of physical distancing, we are creating space together for the community, and we would like to invite you to keep the community building going after our service by joining our virtual coffee hour. In a moment, we will be lighting our chalice here, and I hope you will find something to light as your chalice wherever you are, whether it's an actual candle or even an app on your phone. Whatever you choose to light, may the fires of our chalice flames burn brightly throughout our wider community. I invite you now to join me in taking a breath and entering into a time of centering silence.
Hi.
Our opening words this morning are offered by the writing of Eileen Karplus. Out of wood and stone, out of dreams and sacrifice, the people build a home. Out of the work of their hands and hearts and minds, the people fashion a symbol and a reality. May the house be truly a place of meeting one with another in warmth and joy and openness, meeting one with another in courage and love and trust. And now we continue with Reverend Karplus's words for our chalice lighting. In front of you, may we say together, may these walls know silence as 100 hearts search inward, each for its own small spark of hope that might otherwise be snuffed out in the noise. I invite you to join us in our opening hymn. If you wish, you can let yourself stretch a little as you sing hymn number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
Peace shall walk softly through these
I'm coming to you from the sanctuary, the landmark auditorium here at First Unitarian Society. This is the space that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, who is a pretty famous architect in his day. And today, for our message for all ages, I wanted to share with you a storybook written about Frank Lloyd Wright.
I didn't do the hymns.
It's called The Shape of the World, a portrait of Frank Lloyd Wright. And it was written by K.L. Going and illustrated by Lauren Stringer. And it starts like this. One night, a mama rocked a baby in an old wooden chair. Someday, she whispered, you will build a beautiful building. The baby smiled and cooed. He didn't know about beautiful buildings. He hadn't seen soaring skyscrapers or elegant museums. But someday he would learn. There's a picture of the baby in the rocking chair. When the baby grew into a boy, his mother gave him gifts. Cubes, spheres, cones, pyramids, cylinders. The boy loved the smooth shapes. They felt soft against his fingers and heavy in his palm. It was fun to build them and knock them down. He loved to stack them this way and that way and this. They could grow tall or wide, flat or round. Aha! The boy had learned a secret. Every shape was many shapes. When he was older, the boy spent each summer on his uncle's farm. He worked hard from sunrise to sunset, but sometimes, when no one was looking, the boy marveled at the great big world around him. He saw shapes everywhere he looked. He found an arch in the pathway of a frog, a cone inside the petals of a flower, a triangle in a spider's web, pyramid peaks of anthills, and perfect hexagons in an empty piece of honeycomb. He saw the shiny sphere of the sun and the glowing circle moon. Sometimes the boy hid in the tall grass, watching the weeds bend and sway, studying the shape of a bird's flight. He asked himself many questions. Did the sky have a shape? How many shapes were hidden in a tree? Raindrops made changing shapes, clear and cold. Lightning made jagged shapes, sharp and burnt. The river made smooth shapes, long and curved. The boy loved the shape of the world. He wanted to build buildings as amazing as the world around him. When the boy grew into a man, he became an architect. He worked hard from sunrise to sunset, but he never forgot the smooth weight of the blocks his mother had given him when he was a boy. He remembered the hills and prairies surrounding his family's farm. When other architects chose walls, he chose windows. That's true for this room too. When others set their buildings apart, his were one with the world around them. He built a house like a honeycomb, a museum like a shell, and towers as tall and as thick as trees. People People from far and wide came to see his work. When they looked at his buildings, they imagined the rolling landscape of hills and felt the wide expanse of sky surround them. Like the boy, they too learned to love the shape of the world. One night, when the architect was an old man, he rocked back and forth in his mother's wooden chair. Her promise had come true. When he was a baby, he had not known about beautiful buildings. He hadn't seen soaring skyscrapers or elegant museums, but he had learned. Someday had come and gone. And he had changed the shape of the world. I hope you enjoyed that story. And if you want to check it out from your library, it's called The Shape of the World. Thank you.
I invite you now to join us in our next hymn, number 143, Not in Vain the Distant Beacons.
Our first reading this morning is from Frank Lloyd Wright's appearance in the pulpit of the Meeting House on an August Sunday morning in 1955 when he gave the reflection. The appearance was filmed by CBS, though it was never shown on the network. Wright said, "There is something that stands much higher than wisdom. It is the highest and finest kind of morality. And what is that? Beauty. Beauty is the highest and finest morality imaginable." Now, I believe a home is much more a home for being a work of art. And I think until it is a work of art, it lacks the essential characteristics of a home. And this from John Lloyd Wright, son of Frank Lloyd Wright, from his book, which was simply entitled My Father. John Lloyd Wright said his father's talent was to build a romance around you who will live in it, and you get a house of houses in which everyone lives a better life because of it. It may have a crack, a leak, or both, but you wouldn't trade it for one that didn't. He continued, saying this would be true even if you were building a chicken coop. He weaves a romance around the gullibility of the chicken and the chicanery of the human being, and you get the coup of coops in which every chicken lives a better life. You may crack your head or bump your shins on some projecting romanticism, but life will seem richer, the air clearer, the sunshine brighter. You'll gather eggs with a dance in your feet and a song in your heart, for your coop will be a work of art, not the cold, logical form, chasing the cold, logical function. And finally, this from Marshall Erdman, the contractor who built the meeting house and had a long-lasting relationship with Wright. In an interview conducted in the meeting house, Marshall Erdman had this to say about Wright. Erdman said, "I don't know if he was such a great engineer, but he was the greatest salesman I ever met." Well, it seems very strange to stand here looking out at an empty room at an auditorium that's designed to seat more than 500 people. I hope that very soon we're able to get back into our beautiful buildings and enjoy them once again, and best of all, to enjoy the spirit of community which our buildings are designed to nurture. Well, it became obvious more than 20 years ago that we needed more space. The meeting house was built by just 60 families, that is, pledging units in today's terminology, and the auditorium is designed to seat 200. We now have about 1,400 members, a plateau which we reached in the early 2000s, and many services in the meeting house were standing room only. We decided that our new space would be as green as possible, in accordance with our 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So this building has many green features, including the green roof, those are sedum plants, and a geothermal heating and cooling system. There are no fossil fuels burned on site for this building. More recently, we've added solar electric panels on the roof. When the building was planned more than 12 years ago, solar panels were much more expensive, and we opted for the geothermal system instead. If we were starting today, we'd probably go only with the solar panels. As a result of all these efforts, we got a gold rating from LEED, that is Leadership in Environmental and Energy Design. LEED is a national nonprofit which charges a fee to be rated. But probably the greenest thing we did was to stay at this site. 3 other religious denominations built new green buildings at about the same time as our atrium. It's great that many denominations now recognize the importance of environmentalism. I have not seen all the buildings, but one, Black Hawk Evangelical, is a big building on a cornfield, a former cornfield, west of the Beltline on County Highway S. I happened to be going by on a Sunday morning. I guess I missed church that day. And a traffic cop was stopping traffic on the highway in order to clear the huge parking lot. The vehicle miles generated by that building make the greenness of the building itself look like an afterthought. When it became obvious that we needed more space, our first thought was to go out to the fringes of the city, find another lot, and build a new church there, which is exactly what we did to come here. Our old church, just off the square, built in 1886, was next door to Manchester's department store on the square, which wanted the lot for a parking structure. There's a parking ramp on that site now. This photo was taken in 1919. Please note the car parked in front of the church on Wisconsin Avenue. That's an electric car. We've come full circle in 100 years. I've spotted electric cars in our parking lot. So we joined the rest of the country after World War II, getting into our cars and moving to the suburbs. We are in Sherwood Hills, not Madison. Wright called the meeting house his little church in the country, and it was. This aerial photo was taken in 1950. That's the meeting house near the center, under construction. On the right is the Veterans Hospital, also under construction. The farm fields were operated by the College of Agriculture as experimental crop fields. At the top of the picture is the shore of Lake Mendota, and you could see the lake from the meeting house. It really was in the country and was intended to be accessed entirely by car. The parking lot, by the way, holds 96 cars, which was adequate then, not really adequate now. The bus lines and the bike trail did not exist. In the 1950s, adults did not ride bikes, at least in the United States. An adult riding a bike would be assumed to be very poor or very eccentric. But building a new building on a different site would be, in effect, spinning off another congregation, which we've already done twice. And we're happy that both Prairie and James Reeb congregations are doing well. Since the meeting house was built more than a decade before their foundation, it's part of the history and heritage of all Madison Unitarians. And more importantly, we found out that if the purpose is to reduce crowding at the old site, it doesn't work. No one wants to leave. And our chief minister, Michael Schuler, made it clear he would stay at this site. So we wondered if it's possible to build a substantial new building on a lot of only 4.5 acres without impinging on the national landmark. And this is the solution. We took advantage of the steep slope on the south side of the property and built down instead of up. The main purpose of this design is to minimize its bulk and appearance as seen from the meeting house. The north wall facing the meeting house is as low as allowed by today's building code, and in recognition of Wright, the focus of the semicircle formed by the glass is the pulpit of the meeting house. The atrium building reflects many of Wright's principles: lots of glass to bring nature in, the use of natural materials undisguised, even radiant heating pipes buried in a red concrete floor. The architects of this building, Washatko Kubala of suburban Milwaukee, as well as the First Unitarian Society, got awards from the Frank Lloyd Wright Conservancy for this design. The meeting house is not so sustainable. Saving the environment was not a major consideration in 1951. When Frank Lloyd Wright was born in 1867, words like sustainability and ecology barely existed. Wright actively embraced what we would now call urban sprawl. His broadacre city was really an exercise in sprawl, and our seventh principle was not adopted until 1985. But Wright was far ahead of his time in another respect. When he established the Wright Foundation at Taliesin in the 1930s, he intended to make it self-sufficient, with a farm featuring some of the most progressive and sustainable land use ideas of the time. Today, a family-run dairy farm, Otter Creek Organic Farms, leases 300 acres of Taliesin land. Wright said, Taliesin was to be a complete living unit, genuine in point of comfort and beauty, from pig to proprietor. And Wright believed in the conservation of materials, especially wood, which he loved. To Wright, following nature included using materials according to their best nature. When he designed the benches in the meeting house, he also specified how each piece was to be cut from 4x8 sheets of plywood in order to minimize waste. He railed against the prevalent practice in the early 20th century of elaborately carving and turning wood. He said that at the end of the day, in any furniture factory, a whole forest lay on the floor in the form of shavings and sawdust. Wright said wood has its own texture and color. It's beautiful, he said. Why paint it or carve it? Use it according to its best nature. There's one way in which the meeting house is unintentionally sustainable. It's not air-conditioned. The West Wing, where the church offices are, and the Gabler living room have been air-conditioned for many years, but the auditorium is not. They did not air-condition churches in 1951, at least in this climate. The first buildings to get air conditioning were movie theaters, for obvious reasons, followed by other commercial buildings. In the 1950s, air conditioning was a big selling point. Driving down any main street, you'd see big signs on all the stores and restaurants. Air conditioned, it's cool inside, come on in. Air conditioning did not come to churches, homes, or cars until the later 1950s. The meeting house is a good passive cooling building. Opening the screen doors on the south and the windows in the prow gives cross ventilation, and the wide roof overhangs mean that the sun doesn't touch the south wall in summer. And in the first part of summer, the 1,000 tons of dolomite limestone absorb a lot of heat, keeping the auditorium cool. But by August, it does get warm. The use of air conditioning has changed our society entirely, allowing us to build huge cities in the desert. The shift in population from north to south has changed our politics and our society, not to mention causing the construction of many power plants to furnish the electricity, greatly increasing the production of carbon dioxide. Cities like Phoenix, Taliesin West is just outside Phoenix, are now barely livable due to climate change and are very far from sustainable. The temperature today in Phoenix, by the way, is predicted to be 112 degrees. Nevertheless, we would probably air condition the meeting house if we could, but its radiant heating system does not lend itself to air conditioning. There's no ductwork for the cool air. Wright loved the radiant heating system because it's clean and quiet and eliminates the need for radiators, ductwork, and grills. The system is still popular today, but has to be supplemented by air conditioning. But there's another aspect of sustainability, that is spiritual sustainability. Wright realized that buildings, like people, are mortal. He lived to see some of his most notable creations torn down. But he was undaunted. He thought that the principles, the spirit, and ideals with which a building were designed were more important than the physical building itself. He had grudging admiration for the great cathedrals of Europe, not because he liked their style, but because of the spirit and dedication with which they were built, founded on the principles of religion, soaring upward toward the sky and toward heaven. Wright designed more than 20 religious buildings during his long career. 10 were built, and all 10 are not only still standing, but still serving their original congregations. And not all are Unitarian or Universalist. They include Beth Shalom Synagogue outside Philadelphia, with a soaring three-sided pyramid for the roof, symbolizing Mount Sinai. The first Christian church of Phoenix, using the triangle as a basic motif, was designed at about the same time as the meeting house. Unlike Wright, who said a triangle symbolizes structural strength, the first Christian church says, of course, it symbolizes the Trinity. and the Greek Orthodox Church in Milwaukee, which is a symphony of circles supported by a Greek cross of solid masonry. In every case, he took great pains to reflect the theology and the traditions of the denomination. Wright called our building the Meeting House to invoke the Quaker spirit of humbleness, community, and simplicity. The Meeting House has almost no ornamentation. It's based on the principles of Unitarianism, nature, which Wright almost always capitalized, the Transcendentalists, especially Ralph Waldo Emerson, music, geometry, as exemplified by the Froebel blocks, and the Japanese aesthetic. The 12 Japanese woodblock prints hanging in the loggia, made in the 1850s, were given to the congregation by Wright, who was a collector and dealer in Asian art. Adhering to these principles was more important than leaky roofs. So next time you're in the Meeting House, which I hope can be in the not-too-distant future, ask yourself, what way does Wright want you to be? What mood, what attitude does he want you to put you in? You're certainly under shelter and hopefully feel comfortable, but you can look forward and see the soaring prow, which Wright said symbolizes aspiration. Wright saw unity everywhere. He said music, architecture, and mathematics are so closely linked that they're virtually one. When asked who's the world's greatest architect, one of his answers was Beethoven. I didn't understand that at first, so I asked Dan Bronner, our former music director, who was not surprised. Beethoven was a very architectural composer, he said, taking a basic theme and elaborating it. As Wright chose a basic shape, the triangle in the case of the Meeting House, and built on it and built on it. By the way, our opening hymn, Not in Vain, the Distant Beacon, is based on Beethoven's Ode to Joy from the Ninth Symphony. So Wright said a symphony is an edifice, a building in sound. The secret of Wright's buildings was not to be found in their bricks and mortar, he believed, but in their heart and spirit. That was certainly true of the congregation which built the Meeting House. Though Wright was a member of the First Unitarian Society and his parents were founding members of the congregation in 1879, nearly half the congregation voted against going ahead with the Wright design, arguing that the congregation could not afford it. As it turned out, they were correct. The congregation couldn't afford it, but they went ahead and built it anyway. And all those who voted against the Wright design pitched in and did everything they could to help complete it. Members of the congregation contributed thousands of hours of labor. We call the people who built the Meeting House the stone haulers, because one of the many things they did was to haul all the stone themselves from the small quarry about 35 miles north of here, just the other side of the Wisconsin River. They borrowed the contractor's small truck on weekends and brought the stone here, all 1,000 tons, so the masons would have it on Monday. And Marshall Erdman, the contractor, complained for the rest of his life that we had ruined his truck. Well, it's wonderful to see that the spirit of that congregation has been sustained, with the present congregation putting more than $1 million into preserving and sustaining the Meeting House. Wright would be very pleased that our congregation has undertaken not only to sustain a building, but the spirit in which it was built. The first sermon in the Meeting House was given by a well-known philosophy professor at the University of Wisconsin, Max Otto, whose theme was to own or be owned. Otto said, "It's great that we have a wonderful building designed by a great architect," but Otto said that's not the reason for the existence of the congregation, that we exist to support our principles and to sustain one another. I hope this is a balance that we have maintained. May it be so.
As we move into our time of the giving and receiving of the offering, may we recall, in John Powell's words, that generosity is part of the very structure of this place, as congregants gave what they could to make this place come into being. And in our own way, every week we continue that work together. You'll note that it is easy for you to get to the space that allows you to give your offering today. You can do it from the front page. It may be labeled outreach offering, but it allows you to give a weekly donation as well, or there are other pathways that you can use to give your offering. However you decide to do that, may this continue to be a place of great generosity, of love and giving in abundance. May it be so. For July, our services may take many forms, but a consistent place that you will be able to offer your joys and concerns will be as part of our virtual coffee hour. Another opportunity that's offered every week by our coffee hour is the chance to meet in small breakout rooms. And in those rooms, you may meet new people that you might otherwise not connect with. You'll have a chance to see established friends and share what is happening in your life in a friendly and supportive atmosphere. So if you've not tried our virtual coffee hour after the service, I hope you'll do so after the service today. May we take a moment to share the cares of the congregation. As we journey into the spirit of summer, we honor both the gifts of its warmth and the searing quality of its heat. the bliss of a cool breeze, and the intensity of the threat of thunderstorms and lightning. These days are moving swiftly, and so may we be fully present to what it is that is before us now, knowing that for some of this summertime is wondrous, and for others, it has difficulty. And so, as a diverse community, may we practice contemplating how others experience the world, to understand that my reality and their reality may be different, and yet we share qualities of the same core design. As a community, may we learn to listen for shared feelings, for places of connection. May we be curious and open to hearing difference. May we be taught to take love into the brokenness, to give space for and to be patient with healing. Give us the courage to face the truth of our lives and the joys of our possibilities. May we be students of essential goodness, strong in our knowing that each being is great in their generosity and also in some way insignificant challenge. May we have the strength to feel empathy even when we are tired in our lives. For a moment, as we breathe together, I light a candle to represent the joys and sorrows held by our community. In our sharing, in our connection, in our action for healing and celebration, in all these things and more, we continue to build the beloved community. May love continue to guide us. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to join your voices with ours as we rise in the ways that we do, and join in hymn number 1054, verses 1 through 3. Let this be a house of peace.
Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace.
And now for our benediction, we return to the words of the Reverend Eileen Karplus. May the rain fall lightly on this house. May the sun shine warmly, the winds blow softly, and bless it as a place of joy and peace. Though we extinguish this chalice, we do not extinguish the light of wisdom, the warmth of loving community, or the fire of our commitment to changing the world. These remain until we gather as a community again. I invite you to receive one more gift of music and worship together as we enjoy the postlude.